We are about 30 seconds away from go time. So thank you everyone who's tuning in this evening. Please don't hesitate to drop questions in chat or in Facebook as well, and we will do our best to answer them. And with that, it's now 1800 Pacific. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Joshua Gilliland. I am the chair of the Marketing Subcommittee for the National Sea Scout Support Committee. And this continues our webinar series with the Coast Guard Tech Talks, where we are providing program opportunities in still a complex time with COVID. Some people are able to get back on the water and do things. Some places are, it varies depending on where you live. So, but every Sea Scout who's ever lived has started a small boat engine. I fondly remember putting a Pelican in a scuttlebutt barrel when I passed that requirement. People have been doing that for decades. And there's a long, proud tradition of this is how we teach people how to boat. And this webinar tonight has been done with the help of our trusted Coast Guard liaison. I'm going to turn things over to Bruce Johnson now so he can introduce the material. Take it away, Bruce.
Okay, thank you very much, Josh, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our monthly Coast Guard Tech Talks workshop. These workshops are jointly sponsored by the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and the Boy Scouts of America's Sea Scout program. My name is Bruce Johnson, and I serve as Chief of the Coast Guard Auxiliary's youth programs. You've already met our co-host, Josh Gilliland, Chair of the National Sea Scout Communications and Marketing Team. Josh will be coordinating your questions in the second part of the program. Coast Guard Tech Talks are held on the fourth Tuesday of the month at 2100 Eastern, 2000 Central, 1900 Mountain, and 1800 Pacific Time. Each program focuses on a single science, technology, engineering, mathematics, or STEM topic. These topics are chosen to support the Sea Scout Advancement Program. Next month's Tech Talks workshop will be on nautical line material and knot loads. Tonight's topic is basic engine maintenance. Rather than having a lecture, Lieutenant DeCastro has lined up a presentation by the machinist mates at Coast Guard Station Atlantic City. I'm going to let JD tell you about the demonstration in a minute. As a reminder, we've muted your microphones to make it easier for everyone to hear. If you have questions, please type them into the Q&A box. We'll be monitoring the questions, and we'll be sure to leave time to answer your questions. So let's welcome JD.
Good evening, Scouts and Auxiliaries. We have a fantastic treat for this month's Tech Talk. Coast Guard Small Boat Station Atlantic City was gracious enough to help us out on learning how to do some basic maintenance on your engines. They graciously volunteered to do two things for us. One, do an oil change on the lower unit, and two, do an oil change on the engine itself, and then show you how to go through actually hooking up the engine and running it to test that the maintenance was done well. So in today's video, we're going to see those exact two things. The first thing they're going to do is we're going to be zoomed in on the lower unit. They're going to walk you through how they actually changed the oil in there and what they're looking for. Then the next thing they're going to do is they're going to change the oil and the engine itself. Same thing, they're going to walk you through what they do, kind of say some things about what they're looking for or looking at, how to put the oil back in it, and then when it's all said and done, we're going to hook up the ears to the engine, run some water through it, and watch them run.
So there's two bolts on here. One up top, one down left. This is where it drains from, and this is the indicator when you know it's full. weight?
This gets changed out, lower unit gear case oil every 100 hours. Things that we're checking for when we drain it, if it's emulsified, which means there's been water intrusion into the system, that's an indication that we need to replace the lower unit. And then a second thing that we're looking for that's a big deal is if there's any metal shavings in the oil as well, and that's just a indication that the internals have failed in some way, and there again we need to replace the lower unit. So every 100 hours works out to about every month that we're doing this maintenance on the gear case oil lower unit.
See if there's any water or metal shavings in here.
Yeah, so I mean there's a
Little bit.
little bit of emulsification, but that's not enough to actually.
Would you mind pointing out the emulsification? So the bubbles, right?
Or any discolored, but this was previously used. So.
Yeah. If it's really bad, that oil will look like
Milk.
basically, and that's when things have gone way too far, and it's time to replace the entire lower unit.
And the metal shavings will be shiny.
Correct. Yep. Metal shavings will be shiny. Usually, you can verify that. Like
There's
we
also
were just doing with the flashlight.
there's also magnets on these screws. If there's metal shavings, they'll stick to it. So now, all the gear case oil is out. Hook the pump up, and you're gonna pump until oil comes out of this top bolt. So I know it's full. Feel that?
Go ahead. Yep.
Just keep on over it.
Yeah, so it's pretty 90 weight. It's pretty thick stuff. It takes a little bit to pump in there. And there we go.
Oil comes out, it's full. Put your top on. That's the funny. Unscrew the pump, put your bottom on. That's it.
All right, we just got done watching them change the oil on the lower unit. Now we're gonna jump right in to changing the oil on the engine.
Alright, so this is engine oil. So I want to grab that pan just to make sure.
Back that up. Well, you're gonna have to back it up, Mark.
Oh, maybe. Oh Lord. Oh, back it up more. Back it up more. Back it up more. More than that. More than that. Alright, we're good. See, you gotta get that initial flow. You kind of gauge where it goes and move the pan accordingly. Yeah, this is like changing the oil in your car. There again, it's about every 100 hours that we do this maintenance as well, and checking for the same kind of stuff, making sure it's not emulsified. You're gonna get a dark gray color if you have water in the system, and then just to keep the engine running well, smooth, and prolong the life of the internals, we change the oil. Yeah.
Such as the lower gearbox, is there a breather hole or an air hole that you need to undo to get the oil to flow freely?
If you want to, you can take out the dipstick. That will help.
Yeah, it'll speed up a little bit, but this is not under, well, I guess not a vacuum, but this is more of a vacuum in here by the way we fill it in the gear case versus the engine oil is going to be a little more free flowing through the pan itself.
While we're waiting, you mind kind of pointing out what things are, what we're looking at?
Yes, sir. So this is your fuel filter. We're gonna change this
Oil filter.
oil filter. Sorry. It's the ring.
It's not gonna hook. Oh yeah, there we go. There we go. Let's start it. Yeah, so just like the filter in your car, this oil filter is going to protect against extra sediment, water, any excess fuel that might be in the oil itself, just to protect the engine further down the line when the oil is actually cooling and lubricating the engine parts. Alright, so this is our oil storage facility. Right now, we're just putting some of the oil, which is 10W30, into the filter. That's going to prime it. So there's not a large quantity of air in the system when we start the engine. Put a little more in there. That's good. Another rag. You've got another one.
Oh, I'll need one.
I'll take that.
The first one you got in your head.
They're using a little bit of engine oil to ensure that they get a good seal on the gasket with the oil filter.
That's it. Oil filter changed. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna put a little bit of oil in here to completely flush the system, come out back down there, and then we'll fill it up with 8 to 9 quarts of oil. 10W30. Let me know when. You're good.
Alright, that's good. Runs clear. Means we got no more dirty oil in the system. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten that back up and fill her up the rest of the way. There's not much you get in there and tighten
How tight do you want it?
Snug.
Yeah, so it's just kind of snug up. We don't have a torque value for this drain plug bolt. Trying not to get it on there too tight so that the next person that does it doesn't have a super hard time. Drain plug cover back on and checking the oil levels with what we currently have in there to make sure it's either good or we need to add more. And
So it's about halfway, and the oil also needs to sit. So we'll give it 5 to 10 minutes to sit, and the level should go up a little bit more.
So now after you let it sit and you run it for the first time, is there significant loss or droppage for whatever of the system has not been primed? For example, filling up the rest of the filter, or is it insignificant?
It's pretty insignificant, sir. It actually will level out. So yeah, it'll go in the system and drop, but it'll also rise because it's not settled yet. There's still a lot of oil in the top that needs to settle down into the tank system.
So it's the dirty oil in the top, which wasn't completely flushed, settling back down into it? Or is it the clean oil you put in?
It's the
filtering?
because we did the flush when we let it come out the bottom.
All right, so next what we're gonna do is we're gonna hook the ears up, run some water through the engine. So what's going on here is in order for the engine to actually cool itself, it sucks water up, runs it through the engine and spits it out. So what we have to do is we have to allow water to get into the engine, other words we'll ruin it. So when they shove the ears onto it, they're shoving the ears onto the actual water intake for the engine, hooking a garden hose up to it, turning the water on. And the reason why we're doing this is because we want the engine to actually run. We want the oil in the gearbox as well as the engine to rotate, or to get around, lubricate, actually go through all of its ancillaries as well as all the gears. So that way we know if we have any leaks or if we have any issues. Then we're gonna shift to forward, from neutral into forward, back to neutral, back to reverse, to make sure all the operations still operate.
yeah, it really doesn't make sense. No. It really is. Good question, thanks,
All right, go for it.
All right, well, that's going to conclude it for this evening. I hope you greatly enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. And I'd like to give a thanks to Small Boat Station Atlantic City for letting us come and observe their maintenance and videotape it. Without the hard-working men and women there, we wouldn't be able to have this evening's presentation. So Small Boat Station Atlantic City, thank you very much. Bruce, I'll turn it over to you.
And thank you, JD. That was very instructive. I have a few questions here. Josh, have you gotten any questions yet?
Not yet, but the night is young.
Well, how about if I start with the ones I have and we'll see what else comes in.
Fire when ready.
Okay. If we only use our sailboat's engine about a dozen hours a year, should we still plan on changing the oil and filter on an annual basis?
I would.
You definitely should. When you're running the engine, even if it's only a little bit, it's flushing dirt and other sediment through the engine, and you don't want to have the engine marinating in old or dirty oil over the winter. So my practice is normally to change the oil just as we're getting ready to winterize the boat. If we use the engines a lot more, of course, changing it more often is a really good idea. Let's see, another question is, how often should we check the oil level? You want to take that, Josh?
How often to check the oil level?
Yeah.
for each use. That's the way that's on every
Absolutely.
checklist that I've ever seen. Is you don't just fire the engine up and take her for a spin. Yeah, you check it out. You oil level, water level, check all
Your
the.
check the coolant to make sure that you have enough of that. You want to make sure the easiest time to deal with low fluid level is before you turn the engine on. So, and it's a whole lot easier to add oil than to have your engine rebuilt.
If you've ever seen a impeller melt, you learn that real fast. So.
Oh, well, that's actually another question that I have here on my list. How often should the water pump impeller be changed? I know I have an answer to that, but what would you say, Josh?
Well, I grew up on an Army T-boat, so it was very rare that we had to do that, other than a couple of disasters where somebody kept a seacock closed and it melted. What I would definitely look at a manufacturer recommendation because everybody's.
Most manufacturers will recommend that you replace the water pump impeller at least once every other year. The reason why you do that is that over time, the rubber in the impeller blades dries out and can crack. And it's really impressive to see an impeller where the blades have spun off and the impeller is no longer doing what it's supposed to do. The end result of that is that your engine's not going to get any cooling water through the system, and that is bad.
Yeah.
If you see white in the engine oil, what is it telling you and what should you do about it?
Oh boy. So that could be because water's getting in and it's cooking. And I mean, that opens all kinds of can of worms from the gaskets could be bad, which is causing the leakage to take place. Maybe like a pre-combustion chamber has blown. I mean, like there's all kinds of all bad days that you could be having.
Well, assume that if you're seeing white in the engine oil, you are not going to be using that engine. The reason why is that it means that there's water in your engine oil and water does not compress. So whether it's an internal combustion engine or a diesel engine, you don't want to try to compress water because you can blow out a cylinder block. Okay. Let's see. If we have a diesel engine, should we keep the fuel tank full all the time and why?
Yes, because you don't want condensation building up in the fuel tanks. That's bad. You can also then get, as the tank lowers, the sediment that's at the bottom of the tank could start getting into the fuel as well. That also depends how the fuel system works on your boat. Again, growing up on the Griffin in Redwood City, you had the two 500-gallon tanks and then a day tank that was gravity feed. There are other types of boats where there is no gravity feed tank. There are fuel pumps to move the fuel to the engine. So, like that could be a factor as well. But I believe in keeping it topped off so that way we don't have, condensation in the tanks.
Right. The more air there is in the tank, the more opportunity for condensation. And not only is water getting into your fuel mix bad, it also helps to promote algae and other critters in the fuel, and that does not do good things for your engine.
No, those are bad days.
No, the cleaner you can keep your fuel, the better. And the two things that you probably want to do in a diesel engine is to keep the fuel tank full and use biocide on a regular basis. Follow the instructions on the bottle. Doesn't take a lot of it to keep the biologics out of your fuel. If your diesel engine is having trouble starting, how long should I let it crank?
Is this gasoline or diesel?
Diesel.
I would not crank it for long because I don't want to damage things. I would wonder if ether needs to be injected into it to help it start. Check all, go through the checklist to make sure that there isn't a governor switch that hasn't been, turned on. There are all kinds of little failure points that can happen so an engine won't start.
Right.
And on a Caterpillar D375, there's a button on the governor that you got to push every time, because if you don't, it won't start.
Some diesels have glow plugs that you have to warm up before you get started. My sailboat does not have glow plugs, thankfully, but most diesel engines will start within 2 or 3 seconds if you've got it properly maintained. What happens if you try cranking the engine too long is that the water will get lifted into the engine, and you'll basically flood out the engine with water, which is really not something that you want to be doing. So I think the owner's manual on my boat says, or on my engine says 30 seconds. I wouldn't do anything like that. More than about 6 or 8 seconds, and you really better stop cranking. Let it sit for a while and then try again. Okay. Have any other questions come in, Josh?
No, just kind words. So people saying good job, and great to see the small boat boathouse and those guys. That was so well done and well edited, great dissolves. So hats off to JD and team for putting that together.
Yeah, well, I will certainly pass that word along to him. He is actually coming back from a wedding this evening, so that's why he pre-recorded this so that he could be with us virtually. But we will look forward to seeing everybody next month. We'll be talking about types of lines and the load tolerances that you have with knots and splices, which is another skill that you need to know for your marlin spike seamanship requirements. Incidentally, let me just say that any Sea Scout who is on a boat that has any kind of engine should know how to be able to change the oil in that engine. That's a life skill. It is relevant to your family car, and you'll want to know that. And just knowing where the basic components of that engine are, so that you don't have to be an engine specialist or anything, but just having a little bit of knowledge will help you to understand how it works and how to keep your boat's engine happy and doing what you need it to be doing. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Thanks Josh, and thanks Peter Sargent for your technical help with this. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody next month.
Until then, everyone stay safe and stay healthy. Take care.